Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and today we will be going through the draft grades for each of the two divisions listed in the video title. Before you jump ahead to your team's grade, if you are going to be critical of the grade or try to call me biased, please listen to my quick explanation of the grades before doing so. Here's the Cliff Notes version of that. First, I'm going to have each player's grade on the screen. These were handed out immediately upon every pick during my live stream. I would be happy to go over any specific player's grades in the comments if you really wish, or you can go check them out in the live streams. All right, and here we are on the screen. You can see my 2025 NFL draft grade scale. As you can see, this goes through the entirety of the draft. The players their grades are based on where they're taken and what draft grade I have on them. So if you are taken in the first 8 picks of the draft and I have an elite grade on you or a top 8 grade on you, you'd get an A. If I have that kind of grade on you and you were my guy, you would get an S tier type of grade. And as the draft goes on, A is my baseline to start the draft through the first 56 picks. So, for instance, here at picks 25 through 40, those are the late first round to early second round picks. If I had a late first round to early second round draft grade on you, you got an A. If I had a better grade on you, a straight first round draft grade or a top 8 draft grade, you would get an S tier there. If you had a worse draft grade, a straight second round, you get a B, okay? A is my baseline through the first 56 picks. That changes at pick 57 all the way through pick 111. So right in the middle here, a B. At the heart of the third round, pick 74 through 92, you would get a B if that's the same grade that I had on you, a third round draft grade, and so on. For being better, you get an A, and worse, you get a worse grade. And then after pick 111, the baseline is a C. So for day 3 types of picks, don't hold it against them too much. If they have a C or a D grade, a C is good. It means that you got the player at full cost, but there's nothing wrong with paying full cost for something as long as you get the value out of it, and that's what I'm considering to be a C. Of note, you may have noticed also that S tier is no longer possible for player grades once we reached pick 73, also known as the middle of the third round. No S tier grades given on day 3 of the draft. Pluses and minuses will be seen after some of the player grades, and for the pluses, that just means that the player was one of or multiple of the following things. A, they were a my guy. B, they were a team culture fit. C, they were a scheme fit. D, they fulfilled a team need that stood out to me at the time as something that really needed to be fulfilled in the draft. Minuses are rarely handed out, but they indicate some level of doubt or uncertainty that I have that raises to a level that I decided to give the minus on that. Once again, I look to not give those out. Pluses and minuses had very little impact on the grade. They're mostly eye candy. They do impact it a tiny bit, but for the most part, probably not at the end of the day. I'm going to cover some individual picks for these teams, but the purpose of this video is to grade the entirety of the draft as a whole for each team on a scale of S tier to F tier. That includes E tier, just like my individual players' grades did. And for the overall team grades I present, they are calculated based on the following things. 50% of the grade is a completely subjective grade from myself. 35% of the grade is based on the number of players drafted and in which round they were drafted, also known as draft capital or player capital. 10% of the grade is based on the players' grades that I gave out for the first day and second day players, and 5% of the final team grades is based on the player grades that I handed out from rounds 4 through 7, the average of those players' grades. Trades made, whether a team won them or not, are not directly accounted for. However, they do still have plenty of indirect impact on 35 to 50% of the final grade, even more because that would have an impact on the subjective grade for myself based on the players that they get, and they may also impact future draft grades. For instance, if you traded away a future first round, well, guess what? Now this is probably going to look harder. It's going to be harder to get a good grade, I should say, for this one alone, and of course it'll still impact other areas as well. Going back to this subjective grade, most of that subjective grade is determined by how I feel when I quote-unquote close my eyes. I ignore where each player was drafted, and I just take in the list of the players drafted. How does that group of names make me feel? Also, do I see the vision of this draft for this team? Did they ignore any positional needs that I felt they needed to address? Did they navigate the draft well? did they get in at the end of positional runs instead of getting in at the beginning of those positional runs? Those are the types of things running through my head as I come up with this subjective grade. For the player capital grade, this is an inexact science. I'm talking about the NFL draft. We know that we're not incredibly good at predicting who will and who will not succeed at the next level. Just like some say dating is a numbers game, drafting is also a numbers game. On average, roughly 2 to 4 players in any given draft will become Hall of Famers. I could also list off a whole bunch of other numbers about the draft, but I have faith that you get the idea of what I'm saying. The more tickets that you have for the lottery, the higher the chances of winning it are, and you can't win if you don't enter. The player grades count for a total of 15% of the final team grade. Day 1 and Day 2 picks are weighed at 2 times the rate of those of the Day 3 picks, 10% to 5%. This process is not perfect, but it's fair. And once again, I would be happy to explain in the comments any of the specific questions that you have. Let's get this show on the road, folks. We begin our journey in the AFC South with the Houston Texans. And they began their draft in the second round at pick 34 with wide receiver Jaden Higgins. I gave that an A+. And I've got to tell you, the Houston Texans executed my Packers plan from 2 picks later. That's where the Packers drafted in the first round, to an absolute T. I had been wanted the Packers to try to trade back and draft Jaden Higgins / just draft a wide receiver, but Jaden Higgins specifically. And it looks like Houston Texans were watching my work, and they said, you know what, that sounds pretty good. We're going to do that. So a little bit jealous of that start there, and then they go offensive tackle Ariante Ursary. So you like the plan here of helping your quarterback who had a down second year in the NFL. Let's get things working for him. Following that up in the third round with wide receiver Jalen Knoll, gave that an A. That was the appropriate value in my book for him. Then Nickelback, Jalen Smith, also in the third round, F+. A little early for me, but he wasn't my guy. I did like him. Running back Woody Marks was not really my guy. F- there in the fourth round. Sixth round, 2 picks. Safety Jalen Reed, gave that a C. That's exactly where I had him ranked. And quarterback Graham Mertz, gave that an F-. Then in the 7th round, they started with D tackle Keontae Hamilton, who I don't know about, and they finished their entire draft off with tight end Luke Lachey. I did feel that they addressed most of their needs, maybe not quite all of them in this draft, and I would say that I would have handled the middle rounds of this, their 3rd, 4th round, a little bit differently and remained patient at the running back position, which would have ended up looking like this. So right off the bat, I just want to inform you, I don't really cheat on this at all when I do this. It's one of those things where it's like the meme with all of the numbers. I look at the draft, I see it, and something clicks in my head where I'm like, I would have switched these positions around, drafted these in a little bit of different order, but I'm still going to take these same positions or guys of equal similarity within the same position. For instance, I want to grab just any cornerback. I would have needed a slot cornerback there to replace Jalen Smith with at the 97th pick. So at the 79th pick, instead, I went ahead and I took the slot cornerback Jacob Parrish, who would have gotten an A grade as well as Jalen Knoll there too as well. But the reason that I would have done this is because I felt that the cornerbacks were flying off of the shelves. Jacob Parrish, one of the last, if not the last, of that kind of second tier, and there really wasn't a third tier in this draft class. So to me, that would have made more sense to do at that point in the draft. Of course, we are going to take a step down at the wide receiver position. We're not going to be able to get another Jalen Knoll type. I get that. But just trying to look down the road, the wide receiver position was a little bit healthier. The 4th round, 5th round stuff was better than the slot corners and more specifically just the cornerbacks on whole. Then in the with the 97th pick, 3rd round still, defensive tackle Ty Robinson, that would have gotten an A grade there instead of the Jalen Smith grade. The reason I would have moved that up from being a back end of the round of the draft, I should say, issue is that, once again, interior defensive linemen, just like cornerbacks, they kind of flew off the boards through those first several, day 2, we'll just say, and day 1. And that was obvious. And, honestly, the NFL drafted through, like, all of these guys. So I would have gotten in on that quicker, gotten a better guy in Ty Robinson than I think, I assume Keontae Hamilton is. I don't know. I didn't end up grading him. Then at the 4th round pick there, that would have changed to the wide receiver. Like I said, we'd have been patient with the running back position because that made sense in this draft to do. And it wasn't really hard to figure that this draft, most likely the running backs were going to fall quite a bit. I did like 2 7-round mock drafts, and in both instances, it was very clear that would happen. And I did a 4-round, and a 3-round mock draft, and in both of those instances, it was happening. It just was pretty obvious. So Jalen Lane definitely doesn't give you a little bit different, doesn't give you everything that Jalen Knoll did, but also a very exciting prospect. That would have gotten me a C+ grade there. And then by being patient at running back, I think that really would have paid off because Brashard Smith is somebody who I had like a 3rd grade, 4th round grade on him. That was a B+ at the end of the day there in the 7th round because I capped because of things. But yeah, personally, I like that draft better. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that. It's okay to disagree with that too. I don't mind that. To sum the Houston Texans draft up, I would say, most importantly, they focused on supporting their quarterback, and they did it well, and you cannot argue with that. That was my number one thing that I wanted them to do. For my grades, subjective grade, I ended up giving them a B just really because I saw a slightly different path that I think yielded better results, but I do like what they did. They did reach in some instances as well. Player capital, got an A-. They had a good amount of capital, and they used it well. You like that. For the day 2 grades here, they averaged a B, B-, and really Jalen Smith was weighing that down because that was 3 A's and A+, and then that F+ brought that grade down heavily. And then on day 3, the player grades averaged out to an E+. We put that all together, and I think that the Houston Texans, a B, B+, makes enough sense for their draft grade to me. I'm definitely not going to argue with that. It was pretty darn good. Better than solid, we'll say. That's going to bring us on to the Indianapolis Colts next. And a few fun notes here. First of all, for this draft, I thought that guard and linebacker were needs for them. They have not addressed those with undrafted free agents either. So I guess they would disagree with that. So in terms of drafting for their needs, I suppose I can't hold those too much against them that they didn't attack those positions. Also, by far, the majority of my drafts for them, going 2 rounds especially, but even just first rounders, I would go tight end or edge rusher, and a lot of times I went tight end and edge rusher, sometimes linebacker instead, with the first 2 rounds for these picks for Indianapolis. So obviously them going tight end edge rusher, I'm liking their draft strategy at this point. I drafted 6 of my 7 picks for them in my 7-round mock draft that matched 6 of the 8 positions that they drafted. So, outside of the linebacker and guard needs, I really was on the same page as they were in terms of the positions that they were attacking within this draft. Also, of note, 2nd-round pick, JT Tuimoloau, edge rusher, gave him an A grade. I think him and Latu are going to wear offenses down, offensive linemen, if, of course, their own offense, can stay on the field enough. So that's the concern. But yeah, man, those two together can be a pretty rough duo to play against, I think, for the years to come. Going back to the 1st round, they did draft tight end Tyler Warren there. That got an A. This is what I would have done as well. Once again, same roughly with that 2nd-round pick, so I like that. Then they go with cornerback Justin Wale, 80th pick of the draft, F- there in the 3rd round. Jalen Travis was my guy, offensive tackle. I had roughly a 4th-round draft grade on him. That's where you get that C+ grade for him. Running back DJ Giddens got them a B in the 5th round. 2 6th-rounders, quarterback Riley Leonard, not really a my guy, and defensive lineman Tim Smith, who was a my guy. Both of those got an E, but Tim Smith got an E+. And to wrap it up, they took an ultimate my guy in Hunter Wohler, safety, with their 7th-round pick. That got them a B+. I was a big fan of Hunter Wohler. I think that he's a throwback safety to an extent, not necessarily a super hard hitter, but he can lay down some lumber. And I also think that he has enough athleticism that will translate at the next level that I wouldn't quite call him rangy, but rangy enough that I thought he had potential starter ability, but I thought he was definite safety 3 type of ability within him. He doesn't go to the 7th round, so we'll see if I'm right, but I've been right on safeties in the past that have gone really late or undrafted and are now starters around the league. So that is a position where that can happen for sure, and we'll see if that's what happened here in this draft. All in all, I like 6 of these guys plenty enough. It's really just the quarterback and the cornerback that I'm not so high on. And in short, I would say that this was a healthy mixture of adding to both sides of the ball. I think actually is it roughly every other pick, well, not exactly every other pick, but a pretty even split of getting guys on their offensive and defensive side of the ball in terms also of draft value. So that was an A- ultimately for me. Not quite enough wow factor here, and that 3rd round grade, really kills them. In terms of player capital, they got a B+. In terms of grading for those first 3 rounds, unfortunately, another team where they killed it with one of the draft picks ends up with a B-, C+ there, and their grading for the day 3 picks was a C-, which is just below average. Remember, a C is average on day 3. So I like Indianapolis's draft. Let's go on to Jacksonville. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, a little overview is that for the most part, I thought that they did an excellent job of addressing their team's needs. I did feel like this feels like a first-year draft for a new staff with a team. They're ensuring with this haul of theirs that they're going to be getting this offense going and that they're going to be improving the 2nd and 3rd levels of their defense. These are the 2 biggest things that they need to do in order to be successful, so that makes a lot of sense. I thought that was really good kind of internal scouting and then following that up with, just hitting these things hard in the draft and making sure that happens. I wrote that they had a vision, and it's been a while since that I could say that I respected or even understood the vision of a Jacksonville Jaguars draft. Oftentimes in the past years with the previous staff, I would always comment that it felt like they took my draft and they flipped it upside down because I would like the guys that they were taking high, but I would have much lower grades on them. And then they might get like a guy or 2 lower in the draft that I, thought fell and that I liked as well. But like ultimately I was like, it's a weird draft strategy. And, it didn't work out for them too well, obviously. In my 7-round mock draft for them, I drafted a running back at picks 107 and 221. I didn't have a 236. They did some sort of trading that gave them pick 236 there, where they took the running back. But I took running backs at the same points in my mock draft that I did for them as well. So obviously, if I did it, I think that was smart to do it. So I'm going to give them credit for being smart in doing that. I also don't mind them not addressing the defensive tackle position. I said this in the offseason a few times. The only quote-unquote need that they had at that position was from like a first-round type of talent, or in the 7th round if somebody falls or is there that has it's a home run swing. They're probably going to not make it in the league, but if they do, they also might be really good, that type of player. One last thing, as we get to that first pick, at pick number 2 for Travis Hunter, wide receiver / cornerback, from what I've heard, and I haven't heard much, they're going to use Travis Hunter as a wide receiver first and then get him in on some snaps on defense, which with needing to get this offense going makes enough sense. Gave that an S-tier pick, but I do have to say that I did this twice for them this offseason, earlier on in the offseason, especially where I had Jacksonville trading up in order to get Travis Hunter. So I agree with that analysis and decision by this coaching staff, this new GM, etc., that they've got there. So the only thing about that is I had him trade up to the first pick back when it seemed like Tennessee wanted to get out of that pick, and I had him trade up with the New York Giants at one point. So I didn't end up having him trade with Cleveland, unfortunately, at pick 2. But whatever the case there, S tier for that pick. Then we've got 2 third-round picks, as of course they had to use some capital to move up to pick number 2. They got nickelback, slot safety, Caleb Ransaw. I really like him a lot, love his tape, but I did have a much lower grade on him, F+. And then guard Wyatt Milam, who was my guy all offseason, and I thought that this was good value for him late in the 3rd round, so that got an A+. Then they went with running back, Bayshal Tootin early on, in the 4th round, early on. That got a B grade, and then not too long after that, linebacker Jack Kaiser. This is a D/D plus grade. Jack Kaiser, it's another scenario where he wasn't quite a my guy, but I was higher up on him earlier in the offseason, and then I pushed him back down grading-wise a little bit. So I think he was my 5th linebacker when I did my linebackers video, somewhere like that. So I do like him quite a bit. Not so good with his horizontal movement, but going north to south, like him a lot. Then in the 6th round at pick 194, they got linebacker / edge rusher Jalen McLeod. I don't know exactly how they plan on using him. I thought he was a very, very fun player. I wasn't so sure. I think I had like a 7th round draft grade on him, or late 7th round. So that ends up getting an F+, but I do like him. I think he's at least very interesting. Safety, Ryuan Lane, the 3rd. They grab a few picks later. That got an F. He is not a guy. I could have probably put an F- on there. A lot of people do like him. It wasn't my kind of guy. And then center, Jonah Monheim, they grab in the 7th round. That got him an A. I thought that was a nice pick. Decent value at that point. And they finished this all off with running back LeQuint Allen, who I thought they got really good value on. I have him ranked higher than Bashal Tootin, which I'm probably in a minority with that. But I thought he's a wonderful 3rd down back. Gave him a B grade there. Wasn't quite a my guy. If I had to sum this draft grade up in a short little quote, I would say that they self-scouted, made a plan, and executed it. My subjective grade for them was an A/A-, right? Borderline A there. Player capital-wise, they still got an A- even with that big trade. 1st through 3rd round draft grades on average were a B to a B-, and for the 4th through the 7th round, on average, they got a C-/D+. And so we put that all together into our little scoring sheet, and it comes out as an A-/B+ for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have not had a draft grade graded this well for some time. So I think a really, really strong first draft grade for this group. Looking forward to seeing a better Jacksonville team than we've seen in some time. Let's go on to the Tennessee Titans to wrap up. Looking at the positions that Tennessee drafted, I did feel like there were a couple of remaining needs that I thought that they should have addressed in this draft. Linebacker and a perimeter cornerback to be the 2. Maybe they would disagree with that. That's quite possible, but also those were clearly viewed as weak positions within this draft, even weaker than I thought going into it. So it makes some sense that, if you don't address them in the early rounds, well, there you go. There's all the guys that you liked anyways, and just going to have to grab other guys that you like at other positions. So I get it if that's kind of the thing that happened, but also maybe then prioritize trying to get to one of those positions a little earlier. I don't know. The thing is, I can't argue too much with what they did outside of that second pick of theirs. So let's kick this off with their first pick, of course, going Cam Ward. This is exactly what I would have done. Yeah, it gets a B grade because I didn't have the highest draft grade on Cam Ward, but that's just how the draft works sometimes. Sometimes you got to take a player, even if you don't get the best grading for it, even if you are aware of that. So, yeah, quarterback Cam Ward gave that a B. Then in the 2nd round, I believe they might have traded back a couple times or something, and then they end up with edge Oluwafemi Oladejo, which a lot of people liked him a lot. I liked him. I didn't like him a lot. This was a little bit early for me. That's why it gets a D grade. And then in the 3rd round, they went with safety Kevin Winston Jr., which got them an A grade. In the 4th round here, what a great job of getting some weapons to bring in for Cam Ward, which is an area where they're short on. And I thought they really hammered this 4th round really nicely. A wide receiver, Chimari DK, got them an F+. This was early for my rankings, but he was definitely a my guy, and I had pushed him up well ahead of where he was in the experts. The average, the big board, the consensus big board is what I'm trying to think of. And then at pick 120, tight end Gunnar Helm. Definite my guy. Thought even decent value at this point in the draft. That got them an A+. And wide receiver Alec Iomenor also in the 4th round. I thought this was a good value, but he was not a my guy. I'm not the biggest Alec Iomenor kind of a fanboy. There are some people who thought he might go in the 1st. He's got some people who are big fans of him. I'm nowhere near that for me. I don't think he's necessarily the best player but I think he's like a smart player. If that, like athletically and stuff, he's not super impressive, but how he plays is quite impressive. So we'll see if he ends up translating well or not at the next level. I think that's where, the NFL had some concerns about him as well and why he goes this late. But the potential there and everything and the fit, I like that all. Then in the 5th round, they went with interior offensive lineman Jackson Slater, which I think I saw a report earlier today that they are going to give him they are going to kind of let him possibly succeed at center or guard. They're going to be open to that. It's not a surprise he went this high in the draft, so maybe just ignore my F. I was just a little bit lower on him. I couldn't quite find enough evidence to get him higher in my rankings, but I'm fine with the pick. Like I said, I did like him. And then in the 6th round, you got slot cornerback Marcus Harris, who was a major my guy. Thought this was a bit of a value even at this point in the draft, A++. And running back Khalil Mullins. Got a D grade on that one. I wasn't a big Khalil Mullins guy. I had him, I think, like a 7th round draft grade on him. As I talked about, I thought that group of wide receivers and tight end in the 4th round was a great group of receiver talent to help out their quarterback, but I would have flipped grabbing wide receiver and edge as I viewed the edge class as stronger. And here's what that would have looked like if I would have taken the very next wide receiver that was taken after pick 52 and the very next edge rusher that was taken after pick where's the wide receiver after pick 136, is it? Yeah, replacing Alec Iomenor. So the reason I did not decide before going and grabbing Trey Harris whether I was going to replace Jamari Dike or Alec Iomenor, that depended upon what kind of wide receiver I got when I replaced Olawafemi Oladejo. So, for instance, if this would have been Matt Golden, for instance, I probably would have kept Alec Iomenor and then at pick 103 found an edge rusher. But I thought that this turned out really, really well. So, wide receiver Trey Harris was an absolute my guy. I did think was a steal where he went in the draft. That's an S+ grade. And then after pick 136, edge rusher Braden Swinson was available, who I was not as high on as a lot of people, but he was thought of very highly by a lot of people. And that would have gotten a B grade for me here. That would have been appropriate value for him. Whereas for Trey Harris would have gotten, obviously a very good grade. So instead of an A- and a D, an S+ and a B grading there, if you flip those two, which I thought coming into the draft would have made more sense to do, get the wide receiver in those 2nd, 3rd rounds, and edge rushers, there will be some that were going to fall almost certainly coming into it. If I had to sum up their draft in just a short little quote, I would say that it was a draft of opportunity, that they did a very nice job of taking the opportunity and running with it. So, subjectively, I couldn't quite get up to an A for them, not even an A-, but I came as close as I could. A B++ for them is my subjective grade. Player capital-wise, they had a good amount of capital here. That got them an S-, and from grades 1 through 3, they got a B- for the average player grades, and from rounds 4 through 7, they had an average grade, a C. We combine all of that in my magical formula, and the Tennessee Titans have an A- draft. Look at that. That's something that we haven't seen recently, so you gotta love that. That's going to bring us on to the summary of the AFC South. At the top of the AFC South, we've got the Tennessee Titans with an A-, followed by the Jacksonville Jaguars with an A-/B+, the Indianapolis Colts, B+, and Houston Texans, B+/B. So all these teams swinging above average. In my book, about a B is where, if you just did quite well at everything, you would probably end up. So very, very nice job by the AFC South. Let's go on to the NFC South. And to kick the NFC South off, we have the Atlanta Falcons kicking their draft off with linebacker/edge rusher Jalen Walker at pick 15. Gave them an A for that. And at pick 26, edge rusher James Pierce Jr. got them a B-. As a reminder, trades, capital spent, doesn't really matter for the purposes of this video. It does impact the grade, though. Not going to sit there and go over all of that. Who won, who didn't win. We'll find out who won or who didn't win, or both win. That can happen too, or both lost in the long term. For the 3rd round pick of theirs, at pick 96, they took safety Xavier Watts, gave that an A-. I did have some concerns about his game, a little boomer bust, I shouldn't say boomer bust. I think that there's a chance that he will not translate well to the next level in the NFL due to some athletic limitations. In the 4th round, they went with slot cornerback Billy Bowman Jr. A lot of people really liked him a lot. I was a little bit lower on him, but I thought the value here was just fine. That got him a C grade. And in the 7th round, they went with one of my guys at the tackle position, Jack Nelson out of Wisconsin. Gave him a B+. I thought he looked really nice at the combine. That's where he really caught my eye. And smooth, So, I thought that was a nice late pickup for them after waiting 3 rounds. A couple of notes on this draft for Atlanta. This coaching staff, I felt like they put it all out there, and they have either dug their own grave or they've built the beginning of a dynasty with how they treated this draft. I think it's a low floor, high ceiling draft. A lot of risk, but also a lot of reward potential. They took a swing, and I respect that. I do not mind them getting 2 edge rushers because I did that in my final 3.0 mock draft, and I did the hybrid linebacker/edge and edge rusher combo for them in my 7-round mock draft. And in that mock draft, I gave them Jihad Campbell and Kyle Kennard. So I do like Jihad Campbell better than Jalen Walker, but ultimately, I got to say the combination of Jalen Walker and James Pierce, I didn't have to give up any capital to give them Jihad Campbell and Kyle Kennard, but still, a lot to be excited about if you're an Atlanta fan. Maybe some things to criticize for you, but like I said, it's going to go one way or the other with this draft. They still have a lot of needs, by far the most of any team that I've graded so far. At this point, it was 12 teams, so that was, and I think at the end of the day, really, they ended with like the most needs after the draft. Obviously, didn't have a whole lot of draft capital, and they traded up still in it. But at the end of the day, in a short quote, how did I feel about Atlanta's draft? I'm going to leave this one up to Ricky Bobby. Subjectively, I gave this grade an A-. Like I said, I respect the big moves that they made. In terms of the player capital that they had, C+. In terms of the grades for their first rounds and third round draft picks, they got an A-/B+. And for their day 3 picks, they got a B-/C+ grade on average. All of that put together into the magic formula, we get a B+ for the Atlanta Falcons. A strong draft, made the most out of what they had and the future of what they have, but nonetheless, we'll see. I mean, all 5 of these guys could end up working out, in my opinion, or, we'll see. And that's going to bring us on to the Carolina Panthers. They came in with a lot of needs, and they addressed most of those needs. I may have addressed those needs in a slightly different order than them. I'm not 100% in simpatico of how they addressed the draft, but it wasn't a big enough deal that I felt like I had to redraft for them or anything. I think what they did is fine. They started their draft off with wide receiver Tedroll McMillan. I was a little bit surprised by this. This was one thing that I did not mock to them ever. I did have it as a possibility. I talked about it a couple of times, but I never actually thought that this was the route that they would end up going. So, surprise, surprise, it gets a B grade, a little bit high for Tedroll McMillan for me, but I'm never going to argue against supporting your getting better but struggling quarterback. And then edge rusher Nick Scorton in the 2nd round. I think nice addition there, B grade. And then this is where it really gets nice, helping that defensive line out more in the 3rd round with edge rusher Princely Umanmielen, who I had a much higher grade on. That got an A+ grade. And I think him and Nick Scorton together is a really, really fun combination that you can definitely get on board with. I would have just taken him in the reverse order, really. Then we go to the 4th round, running back Trevor Etienne. A little bit early. I would have been more patient with the running back position in this draft. That got a D grade. I understand some people are higher than him than I am. I just wasn't incredibly high on him. I found a little bit... I found that I felt maybe the offensive line did a little bit more work than I felt comfortable with in terms of projecting exactly how good Trevor Etienne is at the next level. Then at pick 122, still in the 4th round, they took safety Lathan Ransom. That got an A grade from me. That was a nice pickup. Then in the 5th round, they took defensive tackle Cameron Jackson and tight end Mitchell Evans. Respectively, I gave them an F+ and a C+ grade for those two. Big fan of the Mitchell Evans pickup. He's my guy, and I thought that was perfect value on him. Also thought perfect value with their final pick of the draft in the 6th round with wide receiver Jimmy Horn Jr. That's exactly where I had him ranked. That got them a C. He wasn't exactly a my guy, but I think a very fun pick and a nice little addition there late in the draft for Carolina. I thought that they got good players, and I think that they played the board well, all in all. And my big compliment to this draft for Carolina would be that I would be surprised if every one of these guys is not still with the team in 2026. My little quote for them wasn't as much about this draft as it just is about the state of the team, saying that I think that they're still a draft away, but also that they're getting there. They're close. Subjectively, I gave this draft a B. Maybe I could have gone a little bit higher with that. Maybe I was a little harsh with that, nitpicky, given, I said that I would be a little bit surprised if all these players aren't still on the team next year. But nonetheless, that was how I felt at the time. Player capital-wise, they got an A. They had a good amount of capital in this draft. For the first and second day draft grades, they averaged an A-, B+, and for the 4th and 7th day grades for the player grades, they averaged a C-. All in all, put that into our magic formula, and the Carolina Panthers got a B+, a strong, above-average grade draft for them. And, this could have gotten up to an A-, and I wouldn't have argued too hard. Maybe it almost should have been. Let's go on to the New Orleans Saints, and here we are, and I really, really, really like this draft class. I don't love it, but I really, really, really like it. They got a lot of my guys. They got a lot of someone else's guys, and they had a lot of interesting picks as well, and interesting players, often enough, in my book, do end up turning out to be successful. I thought that they played the draft extremely well. In my 7th-round mock draft, I took Tyler Shough at pick 71 for them. They took him at pick 40. We'll assume that they knew better and that they had to grab him there. They felt that he was worth there at pick 40 instead of 71 nonetheless. I also took Tyler Shough for them, thought that was a nice pick for where they are as a franchise. And I took Devin Neal at 131. They took Devin Neal where? At 184. Good for them. I also took a cornerback for them in that same area of the draft, pick 112. They took linebacker Danny Stutzman, but then with their very next pick, they took Quincy Riley. And I also finished my draft off with an edge rusher, and I actually finished off with 2 edge rushers by accident in my 7th-round mock draft. When we look at the players that they drafted, they started their draft off with offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. That got an A+ grade from me at pick 9. I liked him a lot. I think he was my 11th overall player or so, roughly, in this draft. Their 2nd-round pick, as we talked about, Tyler Shough, gave that a D+. This was higher than I had him graded, but sometimes you got to do that for quarterbacks. Then in the 3rd round, they took both defensive tackle Vernon Broughton and safety Jonas Sanker. These are 2 guys who are other people's my guys, and Vernon Broughton was kind of a my guy, and I think a nice fit for them. He earned an E+, Jonas Sanker earned an F. In the 4th round, they took linebacker Danny Stutzman, definitely my guy and a lot of other people's my guy. I think he had a pretty good cult following this offseason. He got an A+ grade there. I thought that was good value at that point. And in the 4th round as well, cornerback Quincy Riley, I thought good value here. Gave them an A for that. In the 6th round, they got running back Devin Neal. Excellent value, B+. In the 7th round, they took tight end Moliki Mataveo. I don't know how to pronounce it. I heard it once, and I'm not quite right. But that got a C grade. I thought that was a good pick. That's a C grade, once again, means that's where I had him ranked. Whether that's early 7th, late 7th, mid-7th, I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. But same story with edge rusher Fadil Diggs. Had a 7th-ish round draft grade on him that earned them a C grade as well for the New Orleans Saints. What I will say when I look at this draft, look back on it, is that I was a little bit surprised at only 1 cornerback and no wide receiver. My quick fix would have been to have not drafted Jonas Sanker and instead drafted a wide receiver. They haven't brought in much quarterback competition as undrafted free agents either, so I guess they feel pretty good with what they have cornerback-wise. So maybe that's why they only took the 1. If I had to summarize this draft up with one little quote, it would be beautiful, commonsensical, and yet flawed, which resulted in me giving this draft grade subjectively an A-/B+. Capital-wise, they earned a A+. They had a good amount of capital here, a very good amount of capital. from the first and second days of the draft, their grades were not so good. They averaged a D+/D between the three of them. And on the day 3 of the draft, they fared much better, averaging a B+/B grade for those players. When all was said and done, they earned an A-/B+. Once again, a very strong draft grade here for New Orleans. I really like a lot of it. Let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have a lot fewer picks. Look at that. At pick 19, they took wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. That earned them a B/B+ because he's kind of a borderline my guy. I like them a lot. There might have been some people who liked him a little bit more, and I feel like I wouldn't have moved him down a half a grade if he was truly a my guy. So I was a little bit embarrassed by that. But look, if Emeka Egbuka was taken 5 picks later, that's an A, maybe A+. Then in the second round, they went with cornerback Benjamin Morrison. That earned them an S+. I thought that was great value. Big fan of him, my guy. In the third round, they went with slot cornerback Jacob Parrish. That earned them an A. Liked him a lot, close to being a my guy. In the fourth round, they got 2 edge rushers. They went with David Walker and Elijah Roberts. Both my guys. Really, both of them, I think, nice fits. I like David Walker for them just a little bit more because I think nice system fit, and I think that what they need the most is a little bit of juice, and David Walker gives them that. But Elijah Roberts, a little bit bigger bodied, 2 totally different types of edge rushers. I don't mind, I like that combination. That's cool, and obviously I love those guys. And then in the 7th round, they took wide receiver Tez Johnson, somebody who a lot of people would have predicted would have gone much earlier in the draft. And I gave that a B-. Value-wise, I thought it was good, but I was very close to having to. If I was a team, I probably would have had Tez Johnson as like a 7th rounder, like basically off my board, except for if we reach the 7th round and there's nobody else that we're like super excited about, let's take a shot on bringing Tez Johnson in for sure. Just the size and athletic numbers combination for him was concerning and not something that you really expect to work at the NFL level. But, special teams as a gadget player on a few snaps a game or in some game plans, I think that you could get some good utilization from him. And we are seeing more and more small wide receivers make it so. Can we get as small as Tez Johnson? I don't know, but worth taking a shot on, that's for sure, in the draft. So that part of that draft I do like for them. However, when we look at this as a whole and we think of the needs that they had as a team, I think that they did a pretty horrible job of addressing their needs. If needs was just something I was grading, I would give them like a D, maybe a C in terms of how well they addressed their needs. But to be fair, and here's where I move that from like just being a D to like, okay, maybe a C. In my 7th-round mock draft, it also took me until pick 121 to get them an edge rusher, which is something that I had like as their number 1 need, which was part of my issue with it. And I would take their draft over the one that I did for them as well. So, how picky can I really be here? I thought they did a fantastic job, on the other hand, of acquiring talent. I thought they got like an S-tier grade in that department. So, subjectively, those things kind of balance each other out, and I gave them a B. But, we're talking about, in terms of addressing the needs, terrible, fantastic job acquiring talent. Honestly, you'd probably rather a team acquire great talent than address their needs, so not so bad. Nice, solid B grade for them. In terms of the capital that they had, that got them a B. This actually ends up being an average amount of capital. And then from the day 1 and day 2 player grades, they averaged an A+/A. And for the day 3 grades, they averaged an A/A-. I think that might be, up to this point in the videos, the strongest draft player grades that we've seen out of any teams. So, a nice job of acquiring talent. If I could sum this draft up in just a few words, in one little quote, I would say that I'm equally as impressed as I am flabbergasted. There's some surprising things about this draft, but once again, great talent. And as you can see, they ended with an overall grade of a B+/B. So it was a draft grade of extremes. That's going to bring us on to the end of this draft. Let's look at the NFC South. The New Orleans Saints had the best of the group with an A-/B+. Thought the Falcons and the Carolina Panthers both had really good drafts there, average B+. And then Tampa Bay, just not quite as good, B+B. But, you know, another solid group here for the NFC South, better than solid there, reaching into the A's and really not going lower than a B+ at the end of the day there. So nice job there, and that's going to bring us on to the end of the video and into the next. Please give this video a like if you liked it. Peace out.